Now starting, all attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, or perhaps good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to the first Managed Sales Pros Closers Club fireside chat. I can see people are still trickling in, and we're going to wait a couple of moments to get started so people can get settled. We're going to give it one more minute and then we are going to get started. So everybody grab a cup of coffee and get ready. All right, let's get this show on the road. Few quick housekeeping pieces. First of all, I am Tracie Orisko, President at Managed Sales Pros. I have with me today Ian Richardson, CEO and founder of Doberman Technologies. A couple of quick things. We're scheduled for an hour today. I've muted the lines to keep the sound quality clear. You're going to see a chat box on the lower right corner. As questions come to mind, please send them over to me, and we're going to have a time at the end for Q&A. Now, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce formally today's guest, Ian Richardson, again, founder and CEO of Doberman Technologies in Lansing, Michigan. Doberman Technologies has been recognized recently in the industry for both the CRN MSP 500 list as well as the Inc. 5000. Ian both recognizes and promotes the need for partnership, and it's one of the reasons he's been able to successfully grow his company. Doberman has clearly defined helping clients achieve their goals as his company's mission. Welcome to Closers Club, Ian.
Thank you, Tracie. Super excited to be here.
So Ian is no stranger to closing cold leads. Today, we're going to spend some time walking through just how he does that. Now, I don't want to steal his thunder, but spoiler alert, it's actually not magic. It's more like process or process, depending on what side of the border you're on. So Ian, what can a company do really early on to begin to build success?
Well, I think one of the key aspects is to clearly define your target client profile. And a TCP really has a couple of key components. You need to try to find reasons that you would say no to a lead. And this isn't because you don't want to work with people, but if you're trying to work with everyone, you're not going to service anyone very effectively. So when we went through that exercise, we started at some of the basics. How many employees do they have? What type of technology do they use? Where are they located? And then you kind of get into a bit more nitty-gritty. So for example, we focus heavily on healthcare. So are they a healthcare vertical or are they not? Are they a services-based industry or not? One of the areas that we try to avoid is hospitality and retail. So when we get those sorts of opportunities, we would disqualify them as we're not necessarily the best fit for their specific use case. So you really want to focus on getting that TCP well defined, both with the sales side of the house as well as the service side of the house, and then share it with whoever's doing your business development and market lead generation to ensure that you're not getting leads that come through the funnel, through market qualification and go over to your sales force that should have been disqualified before they hit the desk.
Okay, so clearly identifying what's a fit and what isn't before you even walk in the door so you don't have to do that work on your first qualified meeting. So now that we know who we want to talk with, what happens next? You're in front of them, you've got their full attention now. How do you make that hour work to your advantage?
So a key aspect is how you're running through this discovery conversation. And I always like to start up front with an implied contract and telling people that it's okay to say no. And I'll walk through both of those concepts. So if I was meeting with you, Tracie, I would say, hey, Tracie, before we get started, I want you to know that it's okay if at any point during this conversation, if we go over something and you say, you know, this isn't going to work, go ahead and tell me. Last thing I want to do is waste your time. By doing this, you're letting them know that you expect every once in a while to be told no. It's an okay answer to give. People really have this aversion to saying, hey, that's not going to work for me. And the most valuable resource you as a sales individual has is your time. And if you're spending 4 hours building a proposal and 3 hours of your engineer's time scoping an environment and 2 hours of prep work and then an hour presentation meeting, you're in that lead for 10 hours worth of payroll time when they knew upfront within the first hour that it wasn't going to work out for you. What a huge waste. How much time do you have? How much payroll paper are those individuals? I don't know about all the attendees on the call, but the guys I send out to a net new environment are some of my hottest top flight engineers. They're super high paper cost. And so I don't want to waste that asset. And I certainly don't want to waste my time pursuing something that they already know it's not going to work. Likewise, if they disclose something to you, hey, we've got 3 people, or you know what, we really don't take security seriously, or our biggest concern is just how much it's going to cost, I don't want to pursue that lead. It's an easy out for both parties. Next piece is you close your process up front. The hardest part of every conversation is the close, and I like to get the hardest part out first. And so, for example, Tracie, my objective with this call is for you and I to be able to get to know each other and for us to determine if we're a good fit. If we are a good fit, the next steps we'll take is I'll have my engineer come out to scope your environment and we'll sit down for a formal presentation. Is that okay with you? If they say yes, you already closed the next 2 parts of your process. You closed your technical discovery and you closed the presentation meeting. They already said yes. You already got it out of the way. So the rest of the call is gravy. You're just getting information and building rapport at that point. So implied contract, okay to say no upfront, get the 2 most difficult conversations out of the way. Next thing is you're going to want to take that sort of demographic information. What's, is your address correct? What are your operating hours? How many people, PCs, servers do you have? What are your applications? All that basic no-brainer stuff that really goes into your calculator to build out the MRR quote. Make sure that you've got the right data. I like to always say, hey, I've got some notes. Is it okay that I make sure we wrote it down right? You always want to try to take the onus on some sort of information being incorrect on you, right? They're always right now. It's okay for me to be wrong. I'm human, etc. So validate out that data and try to do that pretty quick. I usually make a joke out of it and say, Tracie, I've just got this basic information. Is it okay if I interrogate you really quick for 5 minutes so we can get it out of our way? They'll have a little laugh, chuckle, and you'll run right through it. After that, big piece, and this is, I cannot emphasize this enough, is around pain points. And I've got a couple of tips and tricks I'm happy to share with the audience around that. But if you're not discovering pain, you're not going to be able to present value. So you really have to find out why. If they're calling and the only reason that you're having this appointment is we think we're spending too much on IT, you should not be engaging with this prospect. You should say, you know what? I'm probably not going to be any cheaper. I know where my price point is. I know is this cost reduction or not the right fit, and disengage. If they have some sort of significant do it. If they're saying, we're spending an awful lot and cost isn't necessarily our determination, but we're not seeing the value, then you've got a ball game. But if they're just tire kicking to try to reduce costs, why would single thing you try to sell them? So with pain points, there's some key pillars that we'll focus on. We'll always run through the basics of how are your phones working, how's internet power, how's security, have you had a data breach, how's backup, have you had downtime, have you had data loss? Some of those basic things that kind of bring up big key items. A question I always like to ask is, what about your current provider do you like the most? Or what about your current provider do you really like? And usually they'll start off with, well, they used to be really responsive, but now, and then vomit pain on you for about 10 minutes. And if you pay attention, they'll usually give 3 or 4 different examples that then you can circle back around to. And hey, when you went down for those 3 days, was that 100% down, no one could work? Or, or was it just one piece of it down, etc. And when they qualify that down, take notes. So if they're a 20-person company and they were down for 3 days and no one could work for 3 days, take your state's minimum wage, multiply it by 20, multiply it by 8, multiply it by 3, and you have the hard payroll cost at a minimum of what that cost them per outage. And you can then give that information back to them in the presentation and say, hey, you said you've been going down once a month for 2 to 3 days. This is costing you at a minimum this, and this is just state minimum wage, and I'm imagining you're paying more than that. Give them real dollar costs to justify your budget. Also, by getting all of those pain points documented, you're going to be able to emphasize with them, say, man, that must have been really frustrating. Tell me more about that. How has that made you feel? You can build rapport by understanding their feelings and just by listening and repeating it back. And then by repeating all of those pain points is just to make sure I've got the situation right at the start of your presentation, it shows that you listened and it shows that you cared. And that puts you a step above the rest with everyone else. The key thing during discovery is to build trust. So you're not making promises here and you're not describing solutions here. You're just asking what's going on and making sure you understand. Reflective listening is a really, really powerful concept here for those of you who haven't gone through some sort of therapy. Reflective listening is just repeating back to make sure you heard what someone said. So if they said, hey, when ABC happens, it really ticks me off. Tracie, what I heard you say is that when ABC happens, it makes you upset. Is that accurate? Make sure that you're doing that with any key pain point item, and then ask those global discovery questions. My favorite one is how so? Someone says, it was a big impact to our business. How so? How do you mean? Tell me more. Get that key sort of data so that you can quantify that abstract concept of this was a big deal, or we got really upset, or this is the reason why we're looking. If they're saying that to you, that's an invitation to dive deeper. And whenever you let someone talk about their pain, they naturally build trust. That's the basis of all therapists. They're really asking you questions and having you talk about yourself. And people love to do that. So be a sponge and soak it up. You're going to want to make sure you follow a couple of key points during this. If you have an hour meeting, take your phone out at the start, make sure that it's on silent so it's not buzzing, etc. But go into your clock and say, hey, this is the one time I'm going to touch my phone. I'm just going to set an alarm for 50 minutes from now so that it beeps at us so that I make sure that I'm not going over on your time. I don't have anything else to be at after this, but I want to make sure I honor your time and that we're done on time. Set that little timer. When it starts beeping, wrap it up and get out of there. The second big piece, and this is one where we might get a little pushback on the audience from this, give them your budget up front. And by that, I mean any good sales rep can calculate the MRR probably within $1,000 range. You've got the count of people, you've got the servers, you've got the app count, you kind of know what it is. You know what licensing you'd normally quote, you know what a good range is. Do the napkin math and say, hey, I want to give you a budget to make sure financially we don't have a barrier. If you're talking to the right person, this is the decision maker. They already know what they spend. They already know what they're willing to spend. So go ahead and say it's going to be between $2,500 and $3,500 a month. The number that you calculate on your phone goes right in the middle of that range. So you got a little bit of flex in case you were high, a little bit of flex in case you're low. Give them that $1,000 range. Is that within your budgeting parameters? If they say, hey, you say it's $2,500 and they say we're spending $500 a month, we don't want to spend $2,500, disengage. Again, don't waste your time, don't waste their time. If it's a serious lead, they're going to say, yeah, that seems fair, or it might be a little bit of a stretch, but we would be willing to pay that for the value, or some other sort of similar buying sign. You also just removed one of the biggest pieces of anxiety you're going to have on presentation day. They already know what your cost is going to be. They show up to the proposal meeting, they want to be closed. They already said yes to the money figure. You just have to bring them you just have to get them on the dance floor now and do a good dance, but they already went to prom with you. So you just need to close it. Before you leave, make sure you set those 2 appointments. So have your technical calendar, whoever your dispatcher is, go ahead and send them an instant message in that last 10 minutes. Hey, when can we get the engineer out here? Book it for them right then. Pull up your calendar, book the lunch proposal. Proposals should be done at your office. They should be done with lunch, where you provide, you should be giving a tour and you should be doing introductions to at least key players, if not your entire team. So yeah, those would be the big things that I would do during the discovery meeting.
Okay. I think my favorite of that is the concept of creating rapport and creating trust. If you can get them, I think the phrase you used was get them to laugh and chuckle a little. If you can get that to happen, at least you know they are engaged. You can have someone sit and watch you, but the moment you've got them laughing, you have them engaged in what you're going to say next. The process that you just went through here, I had someone on an MSP call this morning describe that as the show up and throw up. So you've shown up, you've thrown up, and what do you do now? The conversation that we had, they talked to me a little bit about struggling with putting together the right proposal. They've done the work, they understand the target, they're in front of the right people, they've done that deep dive. I would say maybe missing a few of the points that you went over, but then they were struggling to put together a proposal in what they felt was the right way. What advice can you give to our listeners today on solid proposal writing and delivery?
Templates, 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 templates. My pitch deck is exactly the same for every single person with the exception of one slide, two slides. One slide is the budget slide, which I'm just typing in the numbers, which we already gave to them. The other one is the rehash of current state, which is what are the main pain points they talked about? And I just put little bullets there, and then I rehash off of notes that I've memorized before the presentation pitch. Hey, you said that your phones go down and that's causing issues here, and here's the math. And you have email issues and that's causing issues here, and here's the math, etc. As well as a restate of what they're currently doing around IT. Who's their current provider? What's the contract state? What's their budget? What's their timeline for making a decision? Who's involved in the room? So we just modify that, modify the budget slide, everything else is exactly the same. Our statement of works for our agreements is exactly the same. This, I think, was a Gary Pika thing, right? Selling the chocolate cake type of aspect. We've been doing that for quite a long time, where we just sell one sort of engagement. And when it comes to managed services, that's what you want. They should all have the same firewall. They should all buy the same computers. They should all look the same in terms of network design, so that it's nice and boring and easy for your team to support. So get your standards in place so that the MRR piece is pretty similar. I agree with who you were talking with. The project might look significantly different each time. You can still have a pretty structured format. And if your sales engineer is doing a good job, he's going to come back and say, hey, they need A, B, C, D, and E done. Have your engineer write out in plain English, this is what they need to have done. Here's the objectives that we're attempting to do. This is what the scope is, and then have a pretty cut and dry notes section. So on our scopes of work, are almost always 3 pages, and that would be that it's a 1-page scope of work. There's 1 page of terms of service and notes that talk about, hey, anything that's undisclosed initiates a change order, and then there's an acceptance page where they sign and I sign. So minimum for any project, it's a 3-page scope of work. So it's still a template, and even though that little technical content might be a bit customized per person, you can still kind of make it a no-brainer type of item. My MRR proposals, exactly the same every single time. Terms of service, exactly the same. Pitch deck, exactly the same. So just put together a process, spend the time building the templates once, and then you're just modifying it. I can crank a proposal out in an hour because I have everything predefined.
Okay. You used the process word, which I love. So let's talk about, when does that happen? I think we're going to dive deep a little bit further this morning about that. But when do they get that proposal? Do you send it to them via email? Do you give it to them to look over before your next meeting? What does that look like? How do you give it to them to ensure that they are giving it their full attention?
So when you're delivering that proposal, that is always in person, face to face with the decision maker. I've never emailed a proposal. I don't fax it. I don't drop it off. They don't get to see it up front. And they shouldn't need to if you're following that process I detailed. So the big aspect about it is that you've already kind of talked about budget, and that budget conversation involves saying, hey, we function on a fixed fee retainer, so you'll pay us a monthly rate, and that's your contract, and that's what you pay. So they get the concept, oh, it's fixed fee. They already have a budget range. Why would they need to see your proposal up front? You've given them the two pieces of information. If they're just price shopping, they'll go to someone else and they'll say, oh, well, I heard it was $4,000 to $5,000 a month. They can say that. They don't need to give a proposal out for that. So if they're agreeing to have a meeting with you, then you shouldn't give them what you're delivering in that meeting up front. This is your time to shine. This is your time to sell the value. This is your time to differentiate between you and the 3 other MSPs that they're going to talk to that are all going to sound the same. This is your chance to be different. So you absolutely need to do it face to face. You buy them lunch because everyone needs to eat. Everyone's going to take a lunch break. And the people who are making decisions about business items of this nature, who are going to authorize a $100,000 3-year contract, are going to appreciate the concept of a working lunch, because then they're going to be able to take their lunch and get something done. Business owners respect that. So we always do it face to face. If you have someone who's pushing back on that, if they're not willing, if they're so far away that it doesn't make sense to them to visit their office, I don't know if I could help on that. That sounds like a national MSP issue, but you should be having local reps in the area who are doing these presentation meetings. And if they're unwilling to step away to talk through $100,000 investment in their business for an hour at your office, they're probably not strategic minded enough to be a good managed services fit. So like you can use some warning bells there. You have to be okay with losing the deal. If you're in a cash flow situation where you need the revenue so badly that you can't just say, well, if you're not going to come out and meet with me, then I guess there's nothing to talk about, right? Like if they're not willing to do that up front when you're dating, how's this going to feel like when you're married?
I was just going to use a dating analogy. You beat me to the punch.
Yes.
So I feel like there's one thing that I hear all the time on calls with MSPs that are talking to me about their sales cycle and how they are winning or potentially not winning business. I feel like there's a spot where everyone reliably falls short in sales. Maybe because it makes them nervous, maybe because they're worried about being seen as pushy, and you've kind of approached it a few times already this morning. I believe that the easiest way to get someone's business is to actually ask for it. How do you approach the final ask?
Yeah, so this is, I think this is probably the #1 reason why people don't close deals, is because they don't materially ask for the business. So I always make sure that when I'm doing my pitch meeting, it's an hour-long appointment. It's over lunch. They usually get there 5 to 10 minutes early, but I budget and bank it minute by minute. We do a 10-minute meet and greet tour of the office. We're back in our seats by 11 minutes. If there's any remote participants, because they might have remote office folks and stuff doing a WebEx dial-in, we make sure they're all good to go by 13 after, and we dive into the deck. The deck's a 30-minute conversation, then it's Q&A. Q&A always goes 10 minutes. They always have questions because they're going to get engaged because it's a good pitch deck. After that, I'm always saying, hey, Tracie, I think we could help solve your problems here. I'd like to grow with you. What are you guys thinking about this? Are there any barriers that you're seeing after this conversation? Remember, it's okay that you tell me no. Ask them for those barriers and then wait. Just be quiet. Give them a chance to think. Give them a chance to respond. Make sure that you re-ask about their timeline. You mentioned that you wanted to make a decision by April 1st. Is that still accurate? Yes, it is. Okay. Make sure that you review your project timeline and that that's going to work well with them, right? Just because they want to go live by April 1st, if you can't deliver it, you should pull that out and address it. Hey, Tracie, I know you wanted to go live with someone new by April 1st. To do this safely, we're probably not going to be done with the project until May 1st. Is that going to work for you? They say, yeah, we'll be able to work on that. And they say, yeah, if we're going to accommodate May 1st too, we're going to need to have a decision by March 1st. Do we think that we can have that decision by March 1? Ask and guide them along your process. It's a two-way street here. So you're going to definitely want to make sure to ask them some specific questions. When do you expect to have your final decision made? Is it okay if I call you Monday at 9 a.m. to follow up and ensure that we don't have questions, right? Get the permission for your follow-up process and then follow it. By setting a follow-up process and giving them that expectation up front, you give yourself a chance to follow through on a deliverable. Hey, I'm going to call you Monday at 9 to make sure you don't have questions. And then you call Monday at 9 and make sure they don't have questions. If you don't get them on the phone, leave them a voicemail and send them an email. So make sure that you're doing those sorts of follow-up items to ensure that you're getting those constant touch points and you have that constant bit of feedback. Someone ghosts on you, someone stops returning your calls, they stop returning your emails, that's your answer right there. But the whole goal is that by being upfront and discussing budgeting throughout this process, you should have weeded out anyone who's going to have a financial barrier. So there's zero reason for them to not talk to you because they knew what the cost would be. And by telling them it's okay to tell you no, you've removed the stigma around that, and they're going to be a little bit more straight shooting with you and say, hey, you know what? We went with another company. And when they do that, ask them why. Hey, what could we have done better? What was the decision-making factors? I want to grow. Would you be willing to do a quick call with me to tell me why? Can I follow up within 6 months and make sure it's going okay? I'll tell you, we had a account that we were doing a rate adjustment on, and they left us for a different provider. It was over money. I said, you know what? We're going to do our best job to offload you. Is it okay if I follow up in 6 months to make sure everything's going okay? Please do. Followed up in 6 months. We re-signed them in 8 months for double the money. Because that other provider dropped the ball, we did a nice job at offloading them, and I did what I said I would do, which was follow up. So
I think that follow up and follow through is probably the most important part of any sales process. If you can't be trusted to make a phone call when you said you were going to, or show up on time when you agreed to do so, it's really hard to create that ongoing trust that you're going to do it when it really counts. Let's talk a little bit about time frame. You've got a couple of meetings that you're having. You've got some follow-up phone calls for questions after your secondary meeting. Do you have a standardized time frame for that to happen? Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a month? How long do you give them between first touch, second touch, and final questions?
So I always like to start right at the beginning. So I'm glad you prompted that. So from when we have that first appointment, our internal response objective is to have sales engineering done within 2 weeks. So that includes getting the engineer out to do the technical discovery, as well as delivering the scope of work to myself to build out the proposal. I'm always booking the proposal meeting out within 3 weeks. So if the engineer went out, so if it's Monday right now, my engineer goes out next Monday, my proposal meeting is going to be the following Monday. So I'm always booking my proposal meeting a week after the engineer visit because it takes about 7 days to turn around that scope of work. And like I said, I can build a proposal in an hour. So even if I got that scope of work Friday night at 5, I can build it in an hour Monday morning before I have the sales meeting Monday at noon. So that's kind of timeline all the way to proposal meeting. Proposal meeting, I set the expectation. Hey, Tracie, I follow up every Monday morning on all open discussions to make sure there are no questions. Is it okay if I give you a call X at X? They say yes, I book them in as a recurring activity so that every Monday morning I'm going to call them at that time to make sure that they don't have questions and to ask how it's going. On that phone call, hey, Ian with Doberman checking in. Any questions come up during discussions? No. Any decisions have been made? No. Has our timeline adjusted at all? No. What is there anything I can do to make sure that we're your final choice? Right? We want your business. I would appreciate the partnership. How can I win it? Ask the questions. Just be honest. They expect to be sold, right? But if I'm not talking with every single opportunity every single week, my close percentage goes way down. And in general on this, we follow a BANT method, so budget authority need timeline. If I don't have a timeline of them making the decision within 2 months, this is the wrong time to be giving a presentation to that opportunity. So if you're proposing to them now and they weren't going to shift until September, you shouldn't be, because your situation might change between now and September, and it's incredibly difficult to go back and say, hey, you know, I told you it was going to be $5,000 a month, but we've actually had to rate adjust because some of our expenses have changed and now it's $5,500. You don't want to have to do that. You're always proposing within 60 days of the decision being made. So you're following a 2-month timeline, you're going to have that decision made pretty quickly, and you're going to have an answer pretty quickly because you've built that rapport and told them it's okay to say no, and they already knew the money.
So let's take that and kind of back up a step. If you get in front of them too early, there's a problem in the beginning of your process.
Yes.
So if we look at ensuring you get in front of someone at the right time, we talked about understanding your target client profile, but let's talk a little bit about when is the right time for that conversation. We've got sort of a 60-day timeline that you've just outlined for us, but what do you do to make sure that you have their attention while you are waiting, I guess, for them to be ready to have that conversation?
So there's a couple of different engagement pieces. I think one of the big ones is where your business development rep comes in, and that's around contract end date. And so if there is a contract end date of, you know, say someone's going to end in June, you're probably going to want to talk with that, start talking with them in March or April. So 120 to 90 days out, because again, you've got some multiple week delays before you actually make the pitch. You want to make the pitch early enough in that process, so 60 days out, because if they're trying to decide for June 1, they might have to give notice to their current provider. And once they've given notice, they're kind of committed on that path to changing, right? So you can give some good prompting questions to help establish that timeline for them, because most companies don't do this all the time. We do, and we forget that the average small business owner, or the dentist or doctor or lawyer or accountant, doesn't deal with IT unless they have to. So it's okay to kind of educate them on what they need to expect and what they might need to do to disengage from their current provider. So assuming that you've given that proposal T-minus 75 or 60 days from when they wanted to change, you're really going to be wanting to push for that decision within a month, so that you have that month of prep work to do, the overlap to put in your stuff, remove the old guy's stuff, have a graceful transition date, so that on day 1 of billing, you're pretty close to being done with the onboard already. And they already went through the experience month before. That's our process. If we're waiting in between there, right? So I've given you my presentation and now I'm following up. Put them on your newsletter list. Give them a phone call. Shoot them, connect with them on LinkedIn. And if they're a healthcare organization and you read an interesting article about healthcare, shoot it over to them and ask them what they think. Hey, I was just reading the news. I saw this interesting thing about surgeons and I was thinking about you guys. What do you think about this? This was my key takeaway on that. Am I on the right pace? You know, am I following the right thought path here, or am I off base? Ask their opinion. Ask for their expert input on things. It shows that you're interested in thinking about them. Do a drop by a couple of weeks after you've done that and give a handwritten thank you card and maybe a little gift basket. Any number of things can be an excuse to engage. You don't want to be pushy. You're just trying to engage. When you're doing your follow-up, that's when you're asking for the sale each time. Outside of that, you're just around. You're just trying to be their buddy. You're just trying to give them some data, give them some items, give them some appreciation and gratitude to show them that you care.
That goes back to a little bit of what I said about you in the beginning. The fact that you understand and value the concept of partnership and of just being there in the beginning is a big piece of winning the business. If you don't want to share your time in advance, how can you be expected to be relied upon to share your time once you have them as a client? That you think you made a comment to, if this is what dating's like, what's the marriage going to be? It sounds like we're creating a rock solid marriage here. All right.
Exactly.
we've walked through a number of things. I'm going to recap a little bit of what we talked about. So first of all, we talked about understanding your target client profile, knowing who to get in front of and why you want to get in front of them. We talked about what that initial discovery appointment should include. Things like implied contract, the fact that it's okay to say no, validating the information that you had before you walked in the door, deep diving into the pain points that have been identified, building that rapport and trust, honoring their time, clearly giving them a budget cost up front, and then moving through to the second meeting where you're going to present your proposal that should be pretty templated and very, very clear. Moving on to identifying the date and time for the follow-up, the final ask, doing that actual ask, and ensuring that throughout the process you are very clearly in their life in some fashion. I myself am a fan of coffee cards because we all know coffee is for closers.
That's right.
On that note, I think we are ready. Ian, unless there's anything else specific you want to go over, I think we're ready for Q&A. We've got a
No, I
couple.
mean,
Go ahead.
yeah, let's get some questions.
Okay, we have a few that have already come in, and the first one I'm sort of picking and choosing. If for some reason we don't get at your question today, we will definitely send you an email with a follow-up answer. The first question, you touched on it a little bit, but I think there was a little bit of a want here to deeper dive down into what do you do if they ghost you between proposal and follow-up call. So you've done your job, your proposal is out there, you're supposed to call them Monday at 2, they're not at their desk. What do you do?
Yeah, so everybody has crises, right? And you want to be strategic in how you choose your follow-up days. So I've got 2 different days and times in my week that I do follow-up. So I send every single person an email, a quick email prompt on Monday morning. The reason why I do it on Monday morning is because then it crops up at the top of their inbox before they get inbox fatigue, right? So start of the week, they just had a weekend, they hit their desk, they're fresh, they sit down to do their email. You're in, since you emailed them 7 a.m. on Monday, you got past all the automated junk that hit Monday at midnight. You got past everything that went from Friday at 5 to Monday 9 a.m. in the morning. You're right there at the top of their inbox, and it says, hey, follow up on our IT conversation. They'll pop into it, they'll take a look at it, and then they say, oh, hey, no questions right now. Great. You just got an answer that there's no questions. You know that there's no new roadblocks, there's no new barriers. And if you ask them 2 or 3 questions, usually they'll answer them. So as long as they're engaging in that way, you don't need to necessarily do anything more when it comes to the follow-up and ask for close. I've got a Wednesday afternoon phone call that I always do for folks that I haven't heard from. And this is an undisclosed reach out. So if I sent you an email on Monday, you haven't replied to me Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock, I'm calling you and saying, hey, Tracy, I had shot over an email on Monday. I just hadn't heard from you. Wanted to make sure that my email got through. Did you get that? Usually they'll say, hey, yeah, no, it's been crazy busy. I've been swamped. I'm so sorry. No, I didn't have any questions. You can ask your couple of questions really quick because they answered the phone. Let them go and say, hey, no problem. I'll shoot you another email on Monday. Hope everything gets better. Have a great day. Write down whatever it is they said that was bugging them and revisit that in your next follow-up email. Shows that you listened, shows that you cared. So that's the process. Now, if they're dodging your phone calls too, so if they dodge the Wednesday phone call, wait until your next follow-up time, do a follow-up. Hey, Tracy, sorry I missed you. I sent an email last week, gave a quick call on Wednesday, haven't been able to get a hold of you. Everything going okay, right? Drop the ask for close, ask if they're okay. They don't answer again, do your second follow-up call. Same time, same block on your calendar, reach out. At this point, if I haven't heard from them, I'm going to mark this as a very likely loss, right? It's gone up to 80% loss, but I'm going to try one more activity. Right now, we're at 2 weeks by my clock. I'm going to go buy my standard thank you package and drop by their office and say, hey, thank you for coming out in the opportunity. We really appreciate you. appreciate the opportunity for business, right? You're dropping by with that. You say that to the gatekeeper. When you're at the gatekeeper, you say, hey, by the way, is Tracie in? I had called her last week. I wasn't able to get on the phone. Just wanted to say, hey, oh yeah, sure. Let me go back and make sure she's okay. It's pretty difficult when someone's at your front door with a gift basket to not come out and say, hey.
I do like a good gift basket.
And then just go ahead and ask the question, hey, Tracie, I just want to drop this off. We really appreciate the opportunity to earn your guys' business. Really appreciate you taking the time. I hadn't been getting through to you. I just wanted to know if there's a better way for me to follow up with you. Did you have any questions? Ask them it. And in general, like if it's gotten to this point, they're going to fess up with a, yeah, hey, we actually decided to do something else, and I liked you and I just didn't want to tell you that, right? And then you remind them at that point, no problem. Remember, it's okay. My second best answer is no. It's okay for you to tell me no. And you really want to emphasize, by emphasizing this up, what I've noticed is that I had to do a lot more of these drop-bys and Wednesday follow-up calls before I started emphasizing how much I appreciated being told no, and that it was okay. Each step of my process, I reinforce it so that they don't feel any barrier to telling me no. And by removing that barrier, you usually remove the ghosts. I haven't had to do a Wednesday follow-up phone call in about 18 months because I always get the answer from the email. Before I started telling people it was okay to say no, I would be doing them nonstop. So I think that's for what it's worth, but if you follow your own process early on, you usually don't have people ghost on you.
Remove the frustration in the beginning so you don't have to deal with it at the end is what I'm hearing there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Next question that we've got is, what if I don't know my target market?
Yeah, this one's tough. I would say that if you're having that conversation, my guess is one of two things happening. One, we're in a cash flow situation where we really and this happens with every business. You might need the cash flow for any number of reasons, and you're feeling in a place of non-safety. In that situation, I feel for you. I think we all go through there. Managing to that profit and loss statement and potentially cutting some below the line expenses, reducing staff count, trying to get yourself back to a spot where there's some baked in profit every month so that you don't have to take a bad deal is good. But if you got to go close, if you got to go try to shotgun it and get whatever deals you can, I get it. The other one is just because you haven't thought through the concept of who are we serving really, really well. So take all your clients and map them out on a whiteboard and map out how much of your standards are they applying? What's their monthly revenue rate? What's their noise volume? What's their engagement with your account management process, right? And try to stack rank them, rate them red, yellow, green, A, B, C, D, whatever you might want to do, but put them in some sort of rating classification. Take the average of all those ratings and then give them an overall client grade. And if you have all your greens or A's or 5 out of 5s, whatever, your best A-list clients, take those clients and look for commonalities among them. That's the basis of your target client profile. And that might be an organization with 25 to 50 employees. They might have 1 to 3 locations. They're opened Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. They don't generally have after-hours support needs. They use Microsoft products. They're on Office 365, and they're in these 5 verticals. Great. You've got the basis of a pretty good target client profile. Look at what the geographic spread of them is so that you can get an idea of mileage distance from your office so that you can limit down some of the variables that you can control and start documenting that out. Look at your B clients and see if there's commonalities with a couple of differences and create good alternate clients, right? A B client is a good one and you might be able to grow them into an A. So look at those B grade clients and create the commonalities amongst them and list that as the alternate clients. Maybe that's the 15 to 25 and the 50 to 100 basis points. Maybe they're a little bit farther. Maybe it's maybe your top 3 verticals are legal, accounting, and healthcare, and this is an insurance company. great. It's a great alternative vertical. You can still do good work. You might be able to grow them up a little bit. It's just maybe because they don't have the compliance needs, you have less of a value prop for them, right? Or whatever it might be. But really try to come up with that good primary and alternate listing. And then look at those C and D clients. Look at those folks that if you had your way, you would never take a call from them again. And you're keeping them because of cash, because you're finding it difficult to fire them, and find the commonalities of them and then put those on the my do not want list. And then you've got a target client profile.
Okay. This question.
One more thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
One more thing on TCP. This should not just be the sales guy or the business principal. Ask your desk manager. Ask your help desk techs. Hey, who do you love having a call from? Who do you hate and why? Right? Get that good mapping of how your team feels about it, because it might be a great account for you, but if your team hates dealing with it, you're going to burn out your talent, and it's way harder to get a technician than it is to get a client.
That's really good advice. Really clearly identifying throughout your entire organization, are they a fit?
Yes.
Okay, here's a question. Has giving out your budget price at a first meeting ever backfired on you?
I guess I would have to ask, it depends on the definition of backfire. Have I had people say, yeah, that's out of our budget? All the time, and that's by design. I don't think it's ever materially harmed me. I mean, I don't hide my pricing from anyone. If one of my competitors asked me for what a range would be on someone, I would give it to them. How does it impact me? If they want to compete on cost and they want to be $1,000 less a month for the same account and the same amount of work than I am, I want them to do that, because that means they're going to have very low margins. They're not going to have money for R&D. They're not going to have money for hiring. They're not going to have money for engagement. They're not going to have money to put on marketing events and pipeline development, and eventually they're going to get crushed under it. So go ahead and take that account for $2,000 less a month than I would. They'll come back, you'll fail, and they'll come to me. So there's very little impact that telling someone what it's going to cost up front could ever have in a negative fashion. You just have to be prepared and okay with the opportunity ending at the meeting. But again, I listed out my kind of costs and aspect. This is saving me 5 to 10 hours per deal, plus the cost of a lunch, plus all of my time and my engineer's time. I'll take the no up front every time. I'd rather not waste my time on building it all out if it's not going to work for them. And you really want to make sure that the account can afford you, right? There's no point in going through and doing an onboard and spending all of that time. You are so underwater with proper managed services for the first 12 months. You're so underwater with all the time you spend and documentation you collect and everything. And if their checks start bouncing 3 months in because they couldn't afford you, what have you done? You've just materially harmed your team. So right. You really want to make sure that the money makes sense up front and early.
Let's go back to the team for a minute. This question is more around your team's process. How do you make sure your team stays on process throughout the sales cycle?
So we use activities in our opportunity management. So it's all math. We've just taken, so every single opportunity we have, every time we build a quote, we have sales, engineering, do anything, we spend any time at all, we track the time and we track the activity. All you have to do is take all of your one opportunities, take all the activity count, take all the time count, divide it out and get an average. And you want to make sure you compare like-minded items. So how long does it take for me to close a 20-seat deal versus a 100-seat deal, right? Chances are the more money per month, the longer it's going to take to make them decide. That's just been my experience. Your mileage may vary. So we take all of that information, we put all of it together, and we map out an opportunity map. Here's the amount of activities you're going to need to do every week to keep this on track. Here's how much time it takes per deal to keep this on track. And then it's just simply monitoring to make sure the team does it. So if your sales guy isn't doing X many phone calls and X many drop bys and X many thank you notes, you know that his pipeline's going to dry up. Likewise, if your account manager isn't doing this many business reviews or this many proactive surveys, you know that your churn rate's going to go up. So it's just simply building out the math and building out the activities you need to do, and then holding people accountable to doing them.
I heard the key word there, accountability. Ian, both you and us are both traction shops. We're very clear on accountability and why it's important in our businesses.
Absolutely. Accountability is key. If you can't hold yourself accountable and your team accountable, if your team can't hold you accountable, if you're a principal on this call and you're the lead sales guy like it is in my organization, if my team can't hold my feet to the fire and cut through my shenanigans, how are you ever going to be able to deliver to the client? Likewise, hold the client accountable to what they said. Hey, Tracy, you had mentioned to me that you were having a meeting on Monday to discuss this. Did that meeting occur? Did you make a decision? Right? And they might come back and say, hey, no, the meeting got pushed, etc. Okay, when's the new meeting? What's the new timeline, right? Ask the questions. Hold them accountable. 9 times out of 10, people appreciate it. I can't say how often when I get an email back from someone saying, you know what, this fell off my radar. Thank you for the follow-up. I'm going to have the meeting now. Right? That happens so routinely because it goes out of sight, it goes out of mind, the crisis of the day comes up. And in general, an IT transition is important, not urgent, until it becomes urgently important.
Absolutely.
And you want to just stay on top of it, right?
Okay, we have made it through all of our questions. We have about 5 minutes left, and I think, Ian, unless there's anything else, we're going to give everybody 5 minutes back in their day.
Sounds like a plan to me. Thanks as always, Tracy. Had a great time, and thanks to everyone who came out and asked questions.
It was a pleasure to have everybody today. You'll see on the slide here contact information for both myself and Ian. Don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that we can do for you or any questions that you have from today's webinar. I look forward to seeing you at our next Closers Club Fireside Chat. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care.